Thanks a bundle. I mean, really, thank you very much. Last year, I made a PH Heroes video about the E39 M5. Now, I poured my heart and soul into that video. I told you stories about how I used to own one, and therefore it wasn't just a car review, it was more a story about the relationship between me and a car. I put it all out there, left nothing on the table, told you about every single detail about the car. I even got the torch out the glove box, for God's sake, the rechargeable torch, and told you about that. And what did you do? You've just voted the E39 M5 the best saloon car of the last 25 years. How am I supposed to make a video about a car I've already made a video about? Come on. Couldn't a few more of you voted for, I don't know, the E46 M3 CSL? I thought that one was going to do quite well. Or that, which came second. Instead, I've got to do the same video about exactly the same car. It literally is the same one. Oh well, I suppose I better put the torch back. Why is it always wet when I get behind the wheel of this E39? Anyway, the fact is, as much as I'm moaning about having to make this video again, it is a pleasure, an absolute pleasure to be back behind the wheel of one of my favourite, if not my all-time favourite cars. Okay, so as we've already given you a full M5 review, which, by the way, you can watch by clicking the link on the screen, for our PH25 video, what we thought we'd do is take a look at the facets of the E39 M5 that constitute its main standout features. After all, there's no point in us making the same video all over again. So what are its standout features then? Let's talk about the engine. So this S62 V8, 4.9 litres, it was an absolutely mega thing in its day. When you think that the old E34 M5, the last iteration of it, had 3.8 litres and that produced 340 horsepower. So this was another 60 horsepower on top of that car. And then there were its contemporaries as well, things like the Jaguar XJR. Now, the six-cylinder one that was around in about 1995, 96, that had 326 horsepower. Nothing really, is it? And even when they brought out the supercharged V8, the 4 litre, that came out in, was it 1998, something like that? Even that only had 370 horsepower. So the point was, it really felt like this car was in a league of its own. It really was something very special indeed. And I know that this engine's been usurped by the mega machines that we've got now, like the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio with 510 horsepower or even more. But the fact is, this still does 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. That's still flipping fast. And even in the real world, all right, the Giulia will do 0 to 60 probably a second quicker, say 3.9 or whatever it is. But I was following Harry earlier on, not hanging around in the Giulia, and yeah, it pulls out a few yards in straight line pace, but it's not flying away from me. It's not that much faster in the real world than this car. And I can tell you that this car still pins you back in the seat. And I will always cherish this car for that. This is the first car I ever drove where genuinely I felt like I was being squashed back into the foam on the backrest. But this engine isn't just all about power, it's how it develops that power and its drivability. So let's talk about the shove. It's got 369 pounds-foot of torque. Now, instead of coming in at 1500 RPM like a lot of these turbocharged cars do these days, that comes in at a relatively high 3800 RPM. But what that gives you is a car that builds in intensity. The performance is always building into a crescendo, and this engine revs to a pretty healthy 7000 RPM, and it gets there with real vigour and vim. And then there's the noise that this engine makes. Now, some people might argue it's a little bit quiet by today's standards. And yeah, I can get that. But the thing is, the noise it makes is beautiful. It's this wonderful, mellifluous V8 tone that goes from this kind of soft and subdued quality to quite hard edged at the top end. Okay, handling. Right, so I would say for all the areas that the E39 is great at, potentially one of its biggest strengths, and maybe even its crowning glory, is the handling, because it is so sublime. To have a car with this much torque and this much power and be able to just trust it, just have confidence in it all the time, I think is something remarkable, and I've always found that remarkable about this car. The way you can just lean on the very edge of traction out of corners and just push the limits of grip, lateral grip, to the very edges, and yet never feel in any way like the car's going to bite you or do anything nasty. It's such a confidence-inspiring chassis. You may be wondering why we've brought the Alfa along. Well, it's for a couple of reasons really, and the first one is that, well, as I said at the start, it came second to the E39 in the voting, and by such a small margin we felt it deserved a showing here. The second reason is it also provides some useful context, and that's context to judge just how far performance saloons have developed over the intervening years. And in terms of performance, it's a heck of a lot. Back when the E39 was born, it seemed beyond the pale that a saloon car could get any quicker than that. But this QF proves that there was still an awful long way to go, because it's so mind-bogglingly quick. And while the current M5, the F90, is even quicker, and by quite a margin as it happens, the QF feels more like the E39's spiritual successor. The QF feels so much more compact than most other modern day saloons, more so even than the latest M3. The Alfa also belies its weight and feels lighter than a lot of modern cars, especially next to the current M5. But in other respects, the QF lags behind the old-timer. In body control, for example, it's nowhere near as settled along our bumpy test route as the E39 M5 is. And although its stopping power is mighty, the pedal action from its brake-by-wire system is nowhere near as progressive either. And that's why, for me, on balance, you made the right decision by voting the E39 and not the QF as the best saloon car of the last 25 years. So, we've got lightweight aluminium wishbones up front, multi-link arrangement at the rear, and then the damping. Oh my god, the damping. Look, where's the multi-way dampener button? There isn't one, because it doesn't need one. Just going through here, the car is soaking up all the bumps. Everything through the corner is taken out there, even as the car is heavily laterally loaded on the outside wheels. No problem at all. And then down this straight, which again is undulating and bumpy, I'm just sitting here feeling like the car is composed and together. Now, I was watching Harry, as I said earlier on. I was behind him in the Alfa Romeo, and along these roads, while I was sat there just feeling, look, I could sit there around there with the traction on the very edge, one hand, and it's just such a wonderful car. You just don't ever feel threatened by it. But anyway, so I'm watching Harry, I'm seeing his head through the rear screen, and it's just doing this all the time, shaking around like a bloody skittle in the back window. Whereas in this car, it's nothing like that. I'm just sitting here with the car moving around, but my body is sort of straight. That's because the way it's set up, the damping is just so good. Then there's the steering. Now, everyone moans about the steering of the E39 M5. Oh, it's like a little, steering box, rubbish. Well, yeah, it's not as good as a rack, I agree. Is it bad? No. Is it the best steering in the world? No. But it's just, look, I can go into that corner, I know how much grip I've got, I can feel the car scrubbing across the ground. There we go, just as the car starts to sort of feel like it's building into understeer. It's nicely weighted, it's well connected around the straight ahead. So, if anybody says to you that the steering in this car, ooh, it's rubbish, as a colleague of mine used to, just tell them to go stick a cork in it, because it really isn't true. And if the steering's good, well, then the rear has to be just brilliant. My favourite bit about the car, I reckon, is the way that you can just deploy all that torque, and you can just get to the point where you feel the tread blocks just moving underneath you, and that comes through as this kind of graininess through the chassis, and then also through the seat of your pants as well. So just as the rear is about to break away, you can feel it all happening. It's communicating all this to you. Oh, the old girl does love to talk. She really does. Loves a good old natter. And that's great, because again, it's about confidence. It means you can really just look at that, over that bump there. Just as soon as it lifts, as soon as it breaks traction, you're off the throttle, you know what you're doing. And you can just carry good speed around a road like this, even when it's a bit wet and a bit slippery. So the final one on my list is comfort. Comfort, because it's so important. If you've got a car like the M5, which is, let's face it, it's not a sports car as such, it's a performance car. It's about crossing countryside, continents, whatever you want to call it, doing big miles quickly, whether that be on the motorway or then on roads like this where, whoa, look at that, or on roads like this where you're having a bit of an enjoyable time. It's still got to be comfortable, because it's a car you are going to do miles in. And that's the other area where this car is truly fantastic. And the reason why the car is so comfortable is because everything, when you get one element of a car right and another element of a car right, it all starts to feed in. So the damping that means that the car is so well controlled over bumps and means that you can hang on to the back end so easily, even in wet conditions, tricky conditions, also means that the car is supple and sublime and compliant over roads like this. Look at it, it's just, this road is just a load of undulations, and yet I'm getting moved around hardly at all, and certainly not viciously or vigorously. It's just a great car. And that's the reason why you could sit there and drive this car for, well, I did drive this car. I drove it for thousands of miles, and I enjoyed every single one when I was really on it or looking just to relax. Because again, down the motorway, it's so quiet, there's so little wind noise, there's so little road noise. Just a brilliant, brilliant car. Really brilliant car in every respect. Well done, PHs, you've chosen wisely. As always, we really hope you've enjoyed this PH25 video, and thanks to all of you who voted in this and all the other categories so far. Do give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos. And of course, there are more categories and our overall winner to be voted on, so head over to pistonheads.com to find out all the details about that.